Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lilith, and today we're going to be going over the 5.4 version of the Discipline Priest. I know that I was supposed to get this out a long time ago, but here it finally is, just like I promised. Just to preface this, I will be putting an index in the description of the video, so if you would like to skip to certain parts of the video, there will be little timers in the information box. Just go ahead and click it to see that part of the video. Alright, so Discipline Priest in 5.4 are still possibly one of the strongest healers that we have, and most every guild that is a heroic progression guild wants to have a Discipline Priest as a healer. This is partially because still in 5.4 people want the safety net of being able to negate certain mechanics with a Discipline Priest, as well as the quick recovery that a Discipline Priest can provide. That being said, like I said, most guilds are going to be wanting a Discipline Priest, as always. Now, one thing I can say about a Discipline Priest from my point of view is that while it is still fun this patch, I've been playing around with Holy a little bit because I find Holy to be fun and engaging and reactive as well as proactive. If you're a Holy Priest and you don't know how to be proactive, you're doing something wrong. And I'm going to be making a Holy Priest guide as well as a Shadow Priest guide because as of 5.4 I've become proficient in all three specs. I carry around all of these gems all the time just so I can re-gem, reforge, etc. on the spot as I'm needed. Now let's go ahead and get into the discipline part of this guide. First of all, we're going to go ahead and talk about our gemming and gearing and reforging, etc. Now in 5.3, if you watch my 5.3 Discipline Priest guide, then you would have seen that I recommended using the, I can't even remember, I think it was Purifieds with the green gem, whatever it was, and as well as straight int gems, which was the 5.2 version of Discipline Priest gemming. Now, after some great consideration, I went on the forums one day and I had been puzzled to see a post about someone asking, is it going to be better to gem straight crit now that our secondaries are outweighing our primaries almost 2-to-1? And so I was a little boggled by this, and so I used something called HealCalc, which is a website. I can put a link to it in the description. And I sat down on a Saturday for about 4 hours and calculated all of my stats originally, took the base heal of all of them, took the base HPS of all of them, and then I redid it by inputting my own stats that I would have if I put 320 crit into all of my yellow sockets, and then I put in my red sockets potent gems, and in my blue sockets, I believe it's Misty. Misty I think is what it's called. And I put it all down on a piece of paper and started calculating percentages and percentage error, etc., etc. And I realized that there was almost a 4 to 6% base heal increase. Not just HPS, but the base heal as well as the HPS was 4 to 6% higher if I gemmed going heavy crit. Now, I posted this on the forums and a lot of priests saw it, and I guess they started taking to it because every priest I've seen after that has been using it. So you can credit Amabella for making me want to do it, and I for doing the math. There you go. So, that being said, for 5.4, this is what our gemming currently looks like. Now, this could change as we get further into the tier, because I'm already at the point that I have this heroic prismatic Prison of Pride, which gives me 9% extra crit, 9% extra mastery, and 9% spirit. Now the downfall is, in raid buffed, I'm about 36% crit, but my mastery is 52%, which is ridiculous. It's astronomical. It gives me 25% extra healing and like 47% or something on my absorption, which is ridiculous. So there could be a point, especially on certain fights like Thok. When I get to heroic Thok progression, I'm going to be swapping everything to straight mastery so that I can simply just sit there and bubble, 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 Divine Star, bubble, 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 Prayer of Many, etc. And I'll have, I could have 65% mastery. Who really knows at this point? But our current gymming looks like this. So, like I said, in your red sockets, you want to have the Potent Vermilion Onyxes, which is 80 intellect and 160 crit. Now, in your blue sockets, if I can find one, there it is, you want to have the Misty Wild Jade. Spirit is not as important as it was last patch, and I'll go over this in a minute, but I'll reason that in just a second. This is the gem you want, Misty Wild Jade, for your blue sockets. And then, of course, for your yellow sockets, you want to be using, well, that's not a yellow socket, but you get the point. For the yellow socket, if I can find a yellow socket, yeah, that works. Yellow sockets, you want to be using the straight 320 crit. Now, what I will say is if you have an item like this, that the socket bonus is 120 intellect, but they're two blue sockets, I would not go for the socket bonus. I would go ahead and get the 640 crit instead of getting the 120 int, 320 spirit, and 320 crit. Just because, like I said, right now critical strike is outweighing our main stat, primary stats 1.5 to 2 to 1, which is great. Honestly, I like it better than having to gym straight intellect because that was boring for me. But so that's your gymming. Now, again, if you have, I don't know, like something that's really unuseful, like a spirit socket bonus, just don't even worry about going for it, I wouldn't say. And then one other thing I want to touch on before we move on to the stat weights is that crit is so important at this point, at least for me and how I play my Discipline Priest to the best of my ability, that I want as much crit as I can. That being said, if I can find an item, I don't care if it has hit, that has that much critical strike on it, I'm going to be using it over a 522 that I was using. So, this being said, if you for some reason have a 502 ring with no crit on it, but it has mastery and haste, and you can get your hands on a heroic ring with crit on it because none of your DPS need it, take it. Because that not only has 1400 intellect, but 900 crit, almost 900 critical strike on one item, and it's a ring, which is astronomical. Alright, so our stat weights. Of course, here we gotta get back into this discussion. Last patch we talked about when you wanted to be using the mastery versus crit and how much of a percent threshold you wanted to have between the stats. So we're going to talk a little bit about this again. For spirit, this patch I've comfortably rated with 6100 in heroics, 6100 spirit. That being said, you need to know what is going to happen. A couple of factors. If you're in an A, mid-level normal guild that is progressing through normal modes at a decent pace, but there's still people that stand in things, of course, I would not recommend going that low on spirit. B, if you don't know how to manage your spirit well, or your mana rather, then I wouldn't go for it. C, if you don't have a trinket like Dysmorphic, Camouflage of Discontinuity, or the Heroic Cordon's Last Gasp, I would not go that low on spirit. Those are the only factors I would not drop that low on spirit. Even a fight that is going to last me 8 to 10 minutes, I'm able to utilize my mana where I need it to be to A, put out the most, the highest percent of healing that I can to help my raid group, while also being able to rely on my other healer or healers if I need that gap to sit down and take a focus potion or something, because they know how low spirit I am. Now, the other reason we don't really like Spirit this patch is because Spirit is not going to affect us as well, I guess we should say, as directly to our healing as well as our output. So that's pretty obvious, but I'm just putting that out there. So I'll go over Reforging in a minute because some of you may not have seen this Reforging that comes along with the straight critical strike build. So next, let's go ahead and move to Haste. Haste has always been our main throughput stat, but unfortunately this patch we aren't really going to be going for heavy haste at all. Now the reason being is because if I hover over to my crit has a chance of applying an extra shield to my raid, which is going to be more healing, less healing the other healers will have to do, as well as less damage on my raid group. And then my mastery not only increases my base healing by a large sum, but it also increases the potency of my damage absorption spells. These are both going to extremely outweigh haste. Haste is more of an aftermath stat. There are some breakpoints, you could say, quote unquote breakpoint, for being able to cast an extra prayer of healing before the spirit shell, but we're not going to be able to get that high because they've reduced the length of the spirit shell by 5 seconds that we have to cast it, which doesn't really directly affect us at all, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. So for now, haste, just I'll talk about how to reforge out of it, etc., but don't worry about it. Crit, obviously, I talked about it, puts the extra Divine Aegis on your raid group, as well as when you're atonementing, I don't know how to verbalize the word atonement. When you're atonementing, you're going to be applying extra Divine Aegises if they crit, as well as, it's gonna be hitting for a hell of a lot. So, we like crit because we can stack our Divine Aegis with our Spirit Shell. B, we can have crit power ward shields. We just like overall to have that extra Divine Aegis as a safety blanket. Now, safety blanket's a harsh word to throw out there, but if you've ever played Discipline through heroic progression and then 1 week you just go holy to see how people react, they fuck up so bad because they're used to having that Divine Aegis or whatever kind of safety blanket, which inherently will make them more aware of their situation and what they need to improve, which is a good thing, but it's just our best stat at this point, in my opinion. Now, our mastery, like I said, it increases all of our healing done as well as our damage absorption spells. The reason I don't like mastery as much is because I don't get as many Divine Aegises, as well as I don't find myself casting Spirit Shell as much as I did in Throne of Thunder in the Siege of Orgrimmar. The Siege of Orgrimmar does have a lot of predictable damage, I will say, but it's not predictable on every fight. There's some fights where you can go 5 minutes without any predictable damage happening and the raid's just dealing with mechanics, and then you can have 1 minute with predictable damage and you only Spirit Shell once. Or Thok, where you can only Spirit Shell at the beginning of every phase because you'll begin getting interrupted. Which is why, like I said, once I begin my heroic journey on heroic Thok, I will be going straight mastery in order to bump both of those benefits up even higher, because the main thing I'm going to be doing is Divine Star, Power Reward, Shield, as well as Prayer of Mending. All right, so those are our stats. So I'm going to talk about Reforging because there is a little bit of a tweak to our Reforging from last patch. It's important. A couple of rules. No matter how high our mastery is, we do not want to Reforge out of it if we can help it. For example, on this item here, it had Spirit and Mastery as a base stat. I could A, reforge out of Spirit to crit, or B, reforge out of Mastery to crit. Like I said, Spirit does not directly affect our throughput or our output in any manner except for how much we can do in a sense. So I chose to reforge out of the Spirit to get the crit. Now this is saving me a lot of mastery, because if I was reforging out of mastery on all my pieces instead of Spirit, I would be at probably 11,000 Spirit or so and only 28%, probably lower, on my mastery. So again, you can see this here on Hordon's Tusk Fragment, Reforged from Spirit, Reforged from Spirit, and now one thing I will talk about too is you can reforge out of the haste if there's haste. Honestly, if I have haste and Spirit on an item, I will most likely be reforging out of the haste. That's just how I like to do my reforging. You don't have to do it that way, but that's a personal preference of mine. So on my legendary cloak, I of course reforged from haste to crit, and then of course here we go, Spirit to crit, and then like these bracers are an odd one because they come baseline with crit and haste. So I went from my haste to mastery, because mastery again is directly proportional to my throughput, whereas Spirit is not going to be as directly proportional. And there's a common pattern on all of my items here that you can see. So that's our reforging. I'm not going to talk about enchants. If you're watching this guide and you need to know what enchants to use, I may or may not have covered it in my 5.3 guide, which I'll put a link to in the description. I'm not going to be covering passive abilities or passives, I guess, in this video, because I did cover that in the last video. So if you want to go learn how to up your play a little bit and you haven't seen that video, I really strongly recommend to go watch my 5.3 guide, because I go, in depth on the healing style of the Discipline Priest, and most of that is still effective for this patch. Alright, we're going to go into talents a little bit. What has changed? Really, effectively, nothing except for Twist of Fate. Twist of Fate is now extremely overpowered on every fight. Almost every fight either A, has ads, B, has a phase that is below 35% that has an increased amount of healing or damage, etc. So it's going to outweigh our use of Power Infusion, because Power Infusion is a 2-minute cooldown, whereas Twist of Fate can be popped every 10 seconds. And on some fights, I have upwards of a 60 to 70% uptime on Twist of Fate, which that's 15% increased damage as well as healing, which is crazy. Divine Insight, I still, even after the patch, I thought I was going to be using this. I'm not finding myself to use it, because Twist of Fate is going to provide me with that extra oomph that I'll need instead of the Divine Insight for healing my tanks, as well as I have a Holy Paladin in my raid group or a Resto Shaman, and I'm a Disc Priest. We don't really have problems keeping our tanks alive. But if you are in a group having trouble on a boss because the tank keeps dying, go for it. Take Divine Insight and just bubble the fuck out of that dude, and you should be fine. Again, these tier 60 don't matter, and we're still sticking with Souls and Insanity. Now, here we go. For these, it's a tricky one. I'm going to go ahead and just talk. I'm not going to talk and explain them to you why I'm using them, but I'll just tell you which ones I'm using for every fight. So right now for Immersius, I use Cascade. For Fallen Protectors, I use Divine Star. For Nurishan, I use Divine Star. For Shaw of Pride, I use Divine Star. For Galacras, I use Divine Star. For Iron Juggernaut, I use Halo or Cascade. For Dark Shaman, I use Cascade or Halo. For Nazgrim, I use Halo. For Malkorok, I use Halo. For Spoils, I use Divine Star. For Thok, Divine Star. Siegecrafter, Halo. Paragons, Halo or Divine Star. And then Garrosh, hell, I don't remember. Divine Star, that sounds right. There you go. There you have it. If you need an explanation on it, just comment and I'll tell you why, because I've been talking for a while now and I don't want to get that in depth on that right now. Alright, glyphs. Nothing's really changed. You guys get the the gist. If you need more explanation on the glyphs I take, go ahead and go back to the 5.3 video. Again, I'd rather not reiterate myself if I can help it. So, is there anything I didn't cover? I don't think so. Alright, well, I'm going to be doing a video to show you guys how to use heal calc soon in order to use it to your advantage, because I personally used it to my advantage to increase my healing output from 4 to 6%. That being said, people may or may not have followed me blindly without doing their own calculations. I do recommend doing your own calculations first, just to see for yourself why and how it actually works synergistically with your output, because it's like leading a blind goat into the woods. I don't know, that's a horrible analogy. Let's go for it. Alright, also, like I said, I'll be doing a holy guide. I'll be doing a shadow guide soon, so stay in touch for those. Again, I'm sorry, I've been on a break for a little bit, but I'm coming back strong. So, as always, good luck and have fun.